A mother spends 5 seasons destroying everyone in her path to protect one person. And in the final 10 minutes of Raising Kanan Season 5, Episode 8, that same son almost lets her die for it. This is the ending of Raising Kanan and what it actually means for everything coming next. There's a moment near the end of this series finale that recontextualizes everything Rack Thomas has done since Episode 1. She's standing in front of her son, and instead of anger, instead of another lecture about survival, she tells him the truth. She blames herself. Not for the people she's killed, not for the empire she built out of blood and paranoia, but specifically for putting Kanan in this life in the first place. And the wild part is, she's not wrong to feel that way because Kanan said almost the exact same thing to her at the very start of the story. He told her, back when this all began, that she was the one who put him here.
She shaped him into this.
So when she says it herself in the finale, it's not a new realization. It's a confession 5 seasons in the making, and it lands differently once you've watched everything that led up to it. Let's back up, though, because to understand why this finale hits as hard as it does, you have to understand what Rack was actually protecting Kanan from, and how badly that protection eroded everything else around her. This is a woman who took out her own brother. She lied to her daughter about who killed their father for years. She manipulated, threatened, and buried anyone who got too close to exposing what she'd done to keep her son safe and in power. And by the time Season 5 rolls around, that debt comes due all at once. The finale isn't really about one final battle or one last score. It's about every single one of those choices catching up to the Thomas family in the span of a single episode. The biggest domino to fall is Jukebox. For most of the season, there's been this uneasy, almost unbelievable dynamic where Jukebox is around Kanan, tolerating him, even helping him recover after everything that's happened. And if you know where this story eventually leads, in the original Power series, that dynamic never should have worked because Jukebox despises what happened to her father. So the tension all season is really one question hanging over every scene they share. How long until she finds out the truth, and what happens when she does? The finale answers that almost immediately. Flossie is the one who finally gives her the missing piece, the confirmation of exactly what Kanan did to her father. And once Jukebox has that information, everything she's been quietly observing all season suddenly makes sense to her in a completely different way. That's actually the most interesting part of how this character has been written. Jukebox isn't someone who reacts emotionally in the moment. She watches. She's been doing it since the season premiere, standing back at Uncle Lou's funeral, taking in the room instead of participating in it. She does it again later, watching Kanan and Rack have a quiet, almost tender conversation outside, patching things up after months of tension between them. And that's the moment that seems to break something in her. Not the murder itself, not directly. It's watching the two people connected to her father's death act like a family again, like everything is fine, like they get to move forward while she's still carrying what he did. So, when she finally confronts Kanan in the finale, it isn't really about revenge in the traditional sense. She tells him plainly that she doesn't want him dead. She wants him to feel exactly what she's felt. Empty. Stripped of everything that mattered. And given the power she clearly has in that moment, the fact that she chooses that over simply ending him says a lot about what this finale is actually trying to say about grief and payback, that sometimes the cruelest justice isn't killing someone, it's making sure they have to keep living with nothing. And that decision sets up the devastating turn the episode takes next, because Jukebox doesn't just want Kanan to suffer in the abstract. She wants him to lose the one person he spent this entire series trying to protect. Kanan spends almost this entire final season being painfully slow to understand something the audience has known for years, and that's exactly why this next stretch of the finale feels so gut-wrenching to watch. It isn't until federal agents corner him and lay out the truth that his mother has been quietly trying to protect him again, this time by considering a deal that would put her own freedom on the line, that something finally clicks. That's the moment he starts to treat her differently. Not because he's had some slow, earned realization over the course of the season, but because outside pressure forces his hand. And once you sit with that, it's almost frustrating because by that point, Uncle Lou is already dead because of choices Rack made to shield him. He's already learned the truth about who really had Famous killed. He's already found out that Snaps and his own father were behind moves that reshaped his entire life. Every piece of evidence pointing to how much his mother has sacrificed has been sitting right in front of him for weeks, and it still takes federal intervention to make him act like it matters. There is a small moment of accountability buried in here, though, and it's worth pointing out because it's easy to miss. Kanan does apologize, specifically for what happened with Marvin, for the role he played in tearing apart something that used to look, however briefly, like an actual family. That throwback scene the episode gives us, the hospital room right after Kanan was born, with Marvin, Juke, Lou, and Rack all in the same space, isn't just nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia. It's a gut punch precisely because it shows you what this family looked like before all of it fell apart. Everyone in that room either ends up dead, estranged, or fundamentally broken by the choices made in the years that follow. Watching that scene land in the middle of the finale forces you to measure the distance between where this family started and where it ends up, and that distance is enormous. Meanwhile, there's an entirely separate storyline building toward its own climax, and it involves Stefano and Pinto, two names that have circled Rack's operation with menace all season. Rack goes back to Pinto looking for protection, the same play she's made before, and he shuts her down in the ugliest way possible, making it clear exactly what kind of deal he'd actually be willing to make with her. It's a moment that reinforces just how little power Rack actually is left by this point in the story, despite spending years positioning herself as untouchable. And that vulnerability is exactly what finally pushes Kanan into action. For the first time all season, he goes to Stefano directly, not to protect himself, but to try to get his mother out of New York entirely, out of the life completely. It's a small, almost quiet moment of growth buried inside a much louder, more violent episode, and it's the first real sign that Kanan has actually absorbed what his mother has been trying to teach him about the cost of this life. Stefano's response is where the finale turns cold and transactional in a way that feels very true to how this world has always operated. He doesn't offer mercy. He offers a trade. If Rack eliminates Pinto herself, he'll let her walk away, and the business relationship between them can continue on his terms. It's not protection, out of loyalty. It's a business decision dressed up as a favor. And Rack, given no real alternative, takes the deal. Pinto is gone by the end of it, and Stefano, somehow, walks away from this finale not just alive, but positioned as someone who could easily resurface again down the line, especially with a prequel series already confirmed to explore this exact era of the family's history. There's also a quieter subplot running underneath all of this violence, the kind of storyline that easily gets overshadowed, but says a lot about where Kanan's story is actually headed next. Dorita reveals she's pregnant, and true to form, Kanan's first instinct is denial. It's a small character beat, but it's consistent with everything we've watched him do all season, deflect responsibility until the consequences are already standing in front of him. What makes this particular reveal matter isn't the reaction in the moment, though. It's what it sets up. Because layered right alongside this news is something else the finale gives fans they've been asking for since this show started. A glimpse of a young Tommy and a young Ghost, appearing on screen for the first time, looking for work Kanan isn't ready to hand them yet. It's brief. It's clearly a setup rather than a full storyline. But it's the finale's way of drawing a direct line from this show into the next chapter of this universe, and it raises a real question worth sitting with. How much of who Kanan becomes in that prequel era is shaped by the choices and the losses piling up in this very episode? By the time the finale reaches its final act, all of these threads, Jukebox, the federal pressure, Stefano, Pinto, the pregnancy, the ghosts of Marvin and Lou, start closing in on Rack at once, and that's really the point. This episode was never building toward one big shootout or one final twist. It was building toward a reckoning, the moment where every choice Rack made in the name of protecting her son finally gets weighed against what it actually cost. And when she and Kanan finally sit down for what plays out as their last real scene together, there's nothing left to perform. No posturing, no threats, no business to discuss. Just a mother telling her son the truth she's clearly been sitting with for a long time, that she takes the blame for all of it, that she never stopped believing she could shield him from consequences that were already set in motion the moment she pulled him into this life. What makes that scene so effective is that it doesn't try to redeem her. It doesn't ask you to forgive Rack for everything she's done. It simply lets her say out loud what the audience has understood for seasons, that love and destruction were never separate things for this family. They were the same instinct, pointed in different directions. Rack loved Kanan the only way she knew how, and that way happened to leave a trail of bodies behind it, including people who once stood in that hospital room celebrating his birth. That's the tragedy underneath all the violence this season. It was never really about crime. It was about a woman who genuinely believed that control was the same thing as protection, and a son who spent years unable to tell the difference between being shielded and being used. And that's exactly why Jukebox's arc lands as hard as it does by the end. Her choice to let Kanan live, but to make sure he loses everything in the process, isn't just a plot twist. It's a mirror. She's giving him the exact emptiness Rack's choices created for her own family years earlier. The show is quietly telling you that this cycle doesn't end with one death or one betrayal. It just moves to the next person standing closest to the damage. And for longtime fans who know where Jukebox ends up years later, watching her willingly step into Kanan's orbit despite everything revealed in this finale raises a real, uncomfortable question about how much a person can know and still choose to stay close to the source of their own pain. There's no clean answer given here, and honestly, that ambiguity feels intentional. Some wounds in this universe were never meant to fully heal, only to be carried forward into whatever comes next. That forward motion is really what this finale is about underneath all the plot mechanics. Every major beat, the hospital flashback, Stefano surviving against the odds, the appearance of young Tommy and young Ghost, Dorita's pregnancy, exists to hand the story off rather than close it. This was never going to be an ending in the traditional sense, because the world this show built was always designed to keep expanding outward into the era we already know from the original Power series, and now into the upcoming prequel exploring Tommy and Ghost's rise. Raising Kanan spent 5 seasons answering a question fans have wondered about for years. How did Kanan become the man we first met? And it answers that question by showing you that nobody in this story becomes anything in isolation. Every hardened, ruthless choice Kanan makes down the line traces back to a mother who loved him too fiercely to ever let him choose a different path, and a family that fractured trying to protect one child from a world they had already dragged him into. So when the credits roll on this series finale, what you're really left with isn't closure. It's grief, mixed with anticipation, watching a family that started in that hospital room end up scattered across graves, prison threats, and broken alliances, while the next generation of this universe is already being quietly introduced in the background. Rack's story, in this chapter, is finished. But the world she built, and the damage she caused trying to protect the one person she loved most, is only getting started somewhere else. That's what makes this ending land the way it does. It doesn't feel like a finale so much as a warning about what's coming next, and knowing this universe, that warning is worth paying attention to. If this breakdown helped you make sense of everything that went down in this series finale, drop a like on this video, and let me know down in the comments what you think happens to these characters next. Do you think Jukebox and Kanan can ever actually coexist after everything revealed in this episode? Do you think Stefano comes back in the prequel? Let me know your theories below, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown when Power Origins finally arrives.